is that? We can look for 21 to start, I guess, next week.
The 24th.
Okay. Okay. Second little bit of activity that you'll see, you'll notice, and this will be kind of phased in over the next couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks. We're going to bring back one of the CPT rigs, and we're going to go in and strategically pick locations where we think we've been effective at pulling gas out of the ground, and we're going to run subsequent CPT logs or probes and see if we can see any noticeable change in the gas interval, the gas-water interface, if you will. We've had some history, some success with that out here, where we've been able to come in and sync a CPT where we had gas before, and the subsequent CPT found no gas, and that tells us that the venting has had some good effect. It's been successful. So we'll come back in and we'll use that as a way to monitor how successful we've been. And so that'll be taking place. We also have in the works a plan to go to up to 10 ORW wells, just a handful of them that remain productive, some of them that are not productive. Most of them over south of Highway 70 near the sinkhole, and start a process of pulling water out of them. Again, very low volumes to try to replicate what we did with OGR number 1, which has been one of our best producers. In fact, it is the best. It has made 5 million, approximately 5 million of the 25 million. So about 20% of all the gas we produce has come out of this one ORW well right here. And when we started the process on this well of pulling just a small amount of water out of it, the production rate more than doubled. It went up significantly. And that's the whole reason we want to come in and try this on some of these other wells. And we'll start in this region over here. And these wells that have black squares around them will be the first ones that we'll start with. And we'll do them in a series. We'll start with a group of 3, and then we'll move to another group. And again, the whole objective is to try to induce flow, try to get more gas to come to the ground.
Basically, the water's holding that gas down. It's not coming through the water.
Right, right. It's such a low pressure that it can't overcome that water column. And that's really been our dilemma. We know we've got gas down there, but it doesn't want to come to the surface because it's just right at that break point.
Well, it doesn't want to go to the well. I mean, if you had well, it doesn't matter how much.
You got water
you
pushing
had.
the gas up
If you
above the screen.
If you had a bubble on the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, it's going to come to the surface. It's a question of flowing horizontally to the well. Right?
You're exactly right, Bob. You've got gas that's trapped above the water, so if we can bring the water down, the gas will follow it into the streams.
Have you ever tried leaving them shut in long enough and see if a pocket builds up again?
We have tried that. Some of these wells have been shut in, and we periodically go back and monitor pressure. And when we do the CPTs, that CPT will indicate whether that gas column is decreasing or increasing.
And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but the process we have of going around and just systematically pulling water out of the wells, we don't discriminate between those that are producing and those that aren't, right?
Well, in the past we have done that regardless if the well was a producer or not. Right now we're concentrating that effort around producing wells.
Right. Okay. And that's, that can happen maybe once a week, 10 days?
Yeah, it's a milk run. They just do a schedule of one well to the next until we get them all done and start the process over.
Okay. Told you it was going to be a short meeting. I don't have much more to say except that the other thing that we find encouraging is we haven't had any major growth. There hasn't been any giant falling in the trees, disappearing to speak of for quite some time. I believe that is attributable to the fact that the cavern is practically full. We've kind of suspected all along that we'd go through a period, an extended period, where this thing would remain pretty active while the earth was going down in the sinkhole and coming into the cavern, and the two were connected. But ultimately, they would find a balance point. And I think that we're probably very close to that right now, and that's why the thing has been relatively calm. The seismicity has been relatively calm. I mean, compared to
since midnight last night, we had around 9 o'clock this morning, we had 3 MEQs, which is very minimal activity.
And there were periods where a day we would see maybe 100 or 200. In the cases of the 2 swarms, they were peaking at almost 1,000 in a day. So it's been a dramatic change. And again, I think it has to do with the system getting to some point of equilibrium. So that's encouraging. Doesn't mean that it won't continue to grow, because there's still some pretty steep sides. And this country down here will not support a hole that's deep for very long. So there should be some subtle sloping off or movement, but I don't really think it's going to be related to the cavern filling. I think it's just going to be related to the fact that you've got these steep edges, and they want to get back to level. Okay? There's two pretty good examples that we can go to in situations that are not entirely, but kind of similar to this, and look at the dimensions of the lake that remain. One of them is at Cavern Lake at Bayou Choctaw, and the other is at Lake Penior, Jefferson Island. In the latter one, that was where Texaco drilled into the salt mine, Morton salt mine, and it drained the lake, created a sinkhole, created a hell of a mess. And today that water depth is about 200 feet where that lake is. Originally it was 10 feet. Okay.
How deep is our sinkhole now?
It went back down a little bit from the surveying that we did last week. We were at about 180 last time we met, and we found it at about 200 in the last, plus or minus. Okay. The other example, the one I mentioned, is that Bayou Choctaw was where a cavern, a brine production cavern that was mined way back in the day, back before we had the expertise that we have today. And it was mined too high. It mined all the way up to the cat rock, and then it collapsed. And this thing created what's called Cavern Lake. That cavern filled in with sediment, and there's a nice 800-foot diameter lake over there on the, I think it's on the north side of the dome. I'm not real sure, but it's at about 100 feet, 120 feet deep. So I think what we'll end up with is somewhere between there, a 200 to 120 foot lake, if you will. And it'll be about this size, probably a little bit larger, but I think it's going to take a pretty good amount of time before that gentle sloughing off of the edges occurs. That's a process that might take years. This happened fast because you had such a rapid displacement of all the material filling the cavern. But now that that process is relatively done, the rest is just going to be gravity and trying to get to some level of stability. So,
All I need is Lake Corner.
there's been a lot of names suggested.
Okay, we could call it something else.
Lake Football.
Lake Cartwright, Lake Boudreaux, Lake Jimmy Jeff, you name it. Which one do you
We
want?
have a lottery here.
John spent enough time.
You don't want a monument?
That's already like.
Well, Cartwright doesn't sound French enough, so I don't think that will.
Mark,
Yes, sir.
okay, I want to talk about the gas a little bit. Well 36, right here in the boat ramp parking lot. I don't know if you misspoke a while ago or y'all thinking has changed. That's what I want to know. When I agreed to let y'all put that well in right there, I was told the radius of influence of that well was approximately, if I remember right, 150 feet. A while ago you mentioned radius of influence of 500 feet. Has y'all thinking on that changed? Because I have a follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
I can answer that, Dennis. Our original spacing was based on an estimated zone of influence of 500 feet. Now, after we put this in and it started producing, Dr. Charlie Fallis did some calculations, and I don't remember exactly what his zone of influence is, but it was close to 150 feet.
Right.
Yeah. But the spacing was, what we had planned was a 500-foot spacing.
Because, you know, that well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I did a little research on this. That well has produced over 2 million cubic feet of gas.
It has been one of the better producers.
Okay, but what I don't understand is, and I'm trying to comprehend, if the circle of influence wasn't greater than what we just talked about, I remember the depth of the gas was supposed to be about 10 feet. I'm no mathematician, but those numbers don't compute. That well should have been out of gas.
Yeah.
Anybody care to speculate on that?
Well, there's two things. There's two things that have likely occurred, either one or both. That the thickness of the gas was greater than was estimated, or the zone of influence is actually larger than was calculated.
And I think there could be also a third possibility. Maybe it's being replenished.
It could be flowing from lower elevations to higher elevations.
I'll offer my opinion. It's speculation, but I think I think one thing you have to consider down here is that the deposition of a sand, let's call the MRAA a sand deposit, is not real even because it's in a fluvial environment. It was laid down in a river setting. And if you go to a delta, in fact, you go to the base of the Atchafalaya or this whole area,